Welcome today our speakers. So we have Graham Colley, Technical Support Manager from SPA, Jenny Landskog, Business Development Manager from Warmworks, and Lorna McCubbin, Head of Asset Management and Compliance at DGHP. I am Cassandra Duff. I am part of the policy team here at SFHA. So the plan for today is we'll hear from each of the speakers. They're going to do a presentation. What we'll do is record that part of the session, if that's okay with everybody. And then we'll have some time for questions at the end, which won't be recorded. So for those of you joining us for the first time, it's great to have you. And what we usually do with these sessions is we'll send out the recording of the webinar and the slides afterwards. Before I pass over to the speakers, just a few housekeeping things from me. So if you would like to speak or ask a question, so again, you'll be muted at the moment, but you can use either the chat function or the raise your hand function on your taskbar if you'd like to pose a question directly. So yeah, you can speak to the presenters, or you can just put it in the chat if you prefer. In terms of being on screen, we hope that you'll be comfortable with having your video enabled for this session. But again, if not, you can switch that off. That's not a problem at all. Thank you again for joining us. Hope you enjoy this session, and I'll hand over firstly to Graham for his presentation.
Thanks very much, Cassandra. So hi everybody, thanks very much for joining us today. So I'll be kicking off the session, and I'm going to take you through some of the more boring bits, I'll say, and then I'm going to hand you over to Jenny and Lorna, who's going to take you through some exciting things that are actually happening on the ground that's been procured through our frameworks and what that could potentially mean for your organisation. So I'm going to start with COP26. It's been in the news a lot recently. I'm not going to touch on it too much, but it's just to provide you some of the global context and emissions and what Scotland's trying to achieve. Net zero for Scotland, what our legislative requirements are and what the aims are for Scotland over the next few years. And then some procurement options that you can get through SPA ourselves. And then obviously we're working in partnership with Warmworks and DGHP. So we're just going to, I'm going to hand you over to Jenny in the first instance, and Jenny will take you through that side of it. So I hope that's okay. So on COP26 then, we've all heard of it in the news. It's been very apparent in Glasgow. It was an important thing for Scotland to have that here in the country. So it's the UN Climate Summit. It's the conference of the parties, and it's 190 world leaders coming together to discuss the impacts of climate change on the world. So it's very apparent. We've obviously got colleagues in the east of the country just now who have no power, have disruption to services. So it's becoming more and more apparent as we progress through the years. So looking back, back in 2015, it was COP21, and that was the Paris Agreement. So all of the countries came together, and for the first time ever, they all committed to reducing the impact of human activities on the planet. So all of them pledged to do what they could to keep the temperature rise across the planet to 1.5 degrees or lower. So thankfully, over the last couple of weeks that COP has been in Glasgow, that key climate target pledge remains in place, and that remains at 1.5 degrees centigrade. Scientists are telling us anything over 2 degrees will cause catastrophic, irreparable damage to the planet and to our existence on the planet. So it's a massive priority, no matter where you are in the world, that we reduce our emissions. And that's what this summit has been all about. So refreshingly, the text that's came out of COP has actually said, you know, we've not done enough, we need to do better, basically, and especially for those that are in poorer countries. So back in COP21, they said that we would be spending 100 million, beg your pardon, per year and transferring that to poorer countries so that could assist in their transition to net zero. That just hasn't happened. So as part of the text for this conference, the funding will be doubled by 2025 for poorer countries. And then at that time, everybody will reconvene and understand where they are and what additional resources needs to be distributed. So the overall goal of COP26 is to reduce carbon dioxide emissions. The scientists are telling us that by 2030, we need to reduce CO2 by 45% to get on target. And by 2050, across the world, we need to be net zero. So there's a lot of targets there. There's a lot that we need to do. So I'm going to take that into Scotland's context and discuss what the Scottish Government have done so far. So in our context, we're already quite far ahead, you'll be pleased to know. The Scottish Government passed its Climate Change Act in 2019, and that is now in place in Parliament in our text. It's an act, and we need to achieve net zero by 2045. That seems quite a long way away, 2045, when you think of it in that context. But when we move down to 2030, it's not really that far away. And what we need to achieve there is probably even more difficult in the short term. It's 8 years away, and what the government are saying is we need to reduce our emissions by 75%. So is it achievable? Yes, as with anything, with lots of effort and lots of cash, anything is achievable. It's actually the toughest statutory target in the world at this time. And the Scottish Government have actually put forth a committee on climate change to drive that pathway to 2030 and what we need to do in the context of our overall strategy. So that's all starting to come into play now. And moving on to a kind of housing context and how it affects us in our industry. Domestic dwellings in Scotland, there's 2.5 million of them. And that's changing all the time. There's a really ambitious development programme across Scotland in the Scottish housing sector and indeed in the private sector. And currently, there's the domestic dwellings contribute 15% of greenhouse gases to our overall emissions. So there's a lot of work that needs done there to take that away. And the first major change is coming quicker than we all might think it is. In the next few years, in 2024, in fact, the Scottish Government will ban fossil fuel boilers from being installed in new build properties. So that's a massive, massive change, and that is happening in the private sector as well. Looking on that on a global scale, the International Energy Agency actually says that by 2025, that across the globe, we should not be installing fossil fuel boilers in any home. So if your boiler was to break down in 2025, and this may happen, the strategy may change by the Scottish Government, you could be faced with putting in a new net zero or low carbon system sooner than you may anticipate. So that might be coming soon as well. So lots to do and lots to think about over the next few years. So I'm going to just take a little step back. When you think of climate targets and things that you need to, it can be quite depressing, but I'm going to just give you a positive stat just to put it all into context. So Scotland's already doing really well. Our renewables met 97.4% of our electricity needs in 2020. So that's a massive amount achieved already. And they very nearly achieved, obviously, 100%. That figure alone has trebled over the last 10 years. And that's enough to power 7 million households. So when you think we've got 2.5 million in Scotland at the moment and transfer that across the border, there's a lot of work that's been done there. So it's fantastic progress. So looking at EISH, that's obviously been the bedrock of our energy efficiency strategy up until this point. That specified a minimum requirement for boilers, for example, and that all translated into savings for our tenants at the end of the day. And the report that the Scottish Government has came up with says that we have saved £210 per tenanted household across the country. So that's brilliant. That's back into our tenants' pockets. On the carbon side of things, it's been great as it's reduced 760 kilotons of annual emissions by putting in these measures. And to give you some sort of context, if you think of Aberdeen and Dundee, that's their emissions combined per annum. So lots of good work has been done there. So moving on to what we need to achieve now. Obviously EISH2 is now in progress and we all need to achieve that in our housing stock. And that's going to require properties to achieve a C rating or better by 2035, with a review of EISH2 and its targets going to be carried out in 2023. And the Scottish Government have actually brought that forward from 2025. And there's a couple of reasons for that, which we'll speak about in a moment. So it's obviously going to be a big push from the regulator as well. So from the next ART reporting period in May next year, and the regulator will require our industry to break down the number of homes that we have banded between A and D, and anything that doesn't comply with D needs to be reported on separately. So the regulator will be watching us very closely over the next few years and how we're progressing with that. And then HIB, that's on the slide, that stands for the Heat in Building Strategy, and it's how the Scottish Government are going to achieve net zero in Scotland. So this was published as a consultation paper back in February of this year, and the strategy has just been finalised in the last month or so, just as COP was coming around. And I'm going to discuss the strategy in a little bit more detail, but this basically tells us what the Scottish Government proposals are for transforming our buildings and the systems that supply them, and how we're going to reach net zero and how we're going to convert these into net zero systems. So let's talk about that now. So this looks a little complicated, but this is just some key points from this strategy that I want to highlight to you and what we will be probably dealing with over the next few years. So LHEAS, or the Local Heat and Energy Efficiency Strategies, you know that the Scottish Government loves some jargon, and that will provide the long-term framework for taking an area-based approach to planning and delivery of these systems and the transition over to low carbon or net zero systems. So that's all going to be a little bit complicated, and it's going to be linked to new zoning regulations and regulation that's going to tie up everything to do with heating our stock going forward. And it's going to be the basis that councils take forward public engagement. So all of these policies are going to be linked together, and that's how the Scottish Government are going to control them going forward. They're working with local authorities now to try and firm up all of the details on this kind of local strategy, and that's going to be in place by the end of 2023. And then, as I said before, EIS2's review period is also going to be brought forward to 2023, and all of this will link together. So some key things that I want to point out to you that's listed in this document is, first off, heat networks. So they are going to play a massive role going forward, and the Scottish Government passed the Heat Networks Bill earlier this year, and that was really to build confidence among consumers and tenants and to attract investment for development, and they're looking to regulate them quite heavily. And in fact, the new regime that will be brought in by the end of 2023, you can see how it all links together, will decide on which of these systems will get funding going forward. And one key change for that is that they must be low energy or net zero systems going forward. So if you had a large gas boiler system that has been put in place in the past, these will no longer attract funding and they will not be permitted. And in fact, they will not be granted planning going forward. So massive changes ahead there. The 1.6 billion figure relates to the spend over the course of this Parliament that the Scottish Government will invest, and these are dedicated to energy efficiency and heat energy efficiency programmes. So that's just a kind of drop in the water of what we need to spend here, but I'll talk a little bit more. But they are really working on how they're going to raise this money, and again, I'll touch on that in a second. So the second part of the strategy that I want to highlight is the skills part of it. So you're no doubt aware that we're facing a skills shortage now. We've got some issues with materials and things affecting the whole country, construction and otherwise. And this all contributes to it, and the government realises this. So they are aiming to create 1,200 jobs for every 100 million that will be created. And they aim to ensure that a new supply chain programme is in place to support all of this. And that will be linked into higher education and all of that good stuff there. It's also to be linked to the new publicly available specification. You may have come across this already, PAS 2035. That's all going to be linked into the skills development and which companies are allowed to provide all of these new systems for you. So that's all going to be very heavily regulated, and that's going to be managed through the microgeneration certification scheme. So it's all kind of getting tied up, and the strategy is, or the hope is, that this tight control will ensure that the previous green energy funds that we've had in the past, where pop-up contractors come, deliver the work, and then they're dissolved, and nobody maintains these systems going forward. We're looking to prevent that going forward. So that's just some of the kind of key points from that strategy that I want you to highlight to you. So as I touched on, no two ways about it, there's a lot of money that's going to be required to deliver this. So let's talk about money. So if you think of a typical high performing gas boiler, that could cost around £3,000 to £4,000 today, depending on which boiler. Compare that with an air source heat pump, and it's 3 times the cost or more with the shortages that we're currently experiencing at the moment. And for a ground source heat pump, that actually goes up to about £17,000. So there's a lot of investment there that's required. But on the plus side of that, if you look at the savings on carbon dioxide, we're actually saving 2,250 kilograms per system. So all of that is going to help achieve these net zero targets over the next 8 years, especially when we need to really make a dent in our emissions. Again, the government's taking this seriously. There's a Green Heat Finance Task Force that's been set up this year, and they will be looking at how to make recommendations to government on how public and private financing will take us forward and how we're going to fund all of this. Because the Scottish Government has quite clearly said that they can't do everything themselves. They need the private sector to work with them in order to deliver all of this. We need to obviously help with that whenever we can. And that's where we come in as a kind of framework provider. We're trying to bring forward these innovative solutions, bringing new companies to the fore to assist with all of that and to provide that value for money. And finally, on this slide, £33 billion is what's required just in Scotland alone to convert our buildings for net zero. So a lot to do, but we're all up for it. We're all capable of doing it. So what's the timeline ahead? So in 2021, EASH2 has begun. COP26 has been in Glasgow, and everything's came out of that. So we know where we're going. In 2023, there will be an EASH2 review, and LHEAS will come into fruition. 2023 to 2025 is going to be massive for all of us in this industry, and for our tenants especially. Half of all retrofits to heating systems will need to be net zero, and the government may decide to take that even forward still at the review periods. And all new homes will be net zero from 2024. So passive house, all of those sort of considerations, that's going to become the norm. And by 2030, 1 million households, domestic households, will require to be net zero or heated by low carbon means, and 50,000 commercial premises. So all of our offices, our industry, all of that will need to be converted. And when we have an oil and gas sector, you can see the challenges that lie ahead for us all. So one final slide for me, just before I hand over to Jenny, is how can we help at SPA? So we have a number of frameworks that are dedicated to energy efficiency. On NA, that stands for our Energy Efficiency Framework. We have broken this down into consultancy, which Warmworks are appointed to, for example, and we have the Measures Delivery Framework. So the consultancy, I'll leave that to Jenny just to take through, because all of the sort of services that is provided through that consultancy will be what Jenny speaks about. On the delivery side of things, we've got 21 individual measures, and that covers anything from traditional EWI to loft insulation top-ups to some of the more, new measures that we are delivering, such as battery charging, heat pumps, EV charging, and battery storage, which DGHP are doing at the moment. There's 24 appointed companies of varying sizes, including 60% small and medium enterprises. So we've got national contractors and your local supply chain on this framework to try and assist and build out your properties to achieve these targets. And secondly, we also have the whole house framework, which is broken down into domestic settings only. But there's individual heating lots with, again, national or local suppliers. A multi-lot where you can put in new heating systems, you can put in PV, all of that sort of thing, all in the one package. And finally, the one thing that I want to touch on is a DPS, which stands for a dynamic purchasing system. And this allows new entrants to the market. So this is our innovation product, if you like. So there's no two ways about it. There's going to be a lot of companies who come into the industry over the next few years, and we want to make sure that you will be able to procure these companies going forward. So any company that has a new innovative solution that fits into either heating or some multi-faceted aspect of what we need to do for net zero will be invited to apply, and you will be able to procure these companies through that individual product. So we've got a lot of work to do. We will keep supporting you throughout this period of time, and we'll keep innovating to make sure that we have the procurement solutions for you to kind of drive forward net zero. So now my boring bit's done, you'll be glad to hear. I'm going to hand over to Jenny and Lorna, who are going to take you through a real life project and what work they've done to achieve that and how the frameworks have helped them do that. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Graham. I think you might have been doing yourself a bit of a disservice there, not boring at all. It was a good summary about kind of where we are now, and everyone here knows, I think, on this call that having the right procurement routes in place, is really key to enabling these sorts of projects and taking them forward. So it's really important to have that context. Right, I shall share my screen and hope I don't have any technical glitches. There's always someone. So, right, let's see. Can I get a thumbs up from anyone just that they can see that?
Okay. Good.
Great, thanks guys. So for anyone I have not met before, my name's Jenny and I'm in the business development team at Warmworks. So I'm just going to talk through a bit about a project that we've got with DGHP, how we work together to secure the funding, a bit about our role as managing agent, and some of the kind of outcomes we expect to see. So first of all, we developed a really strong relationship with DGHP through the delivery of a previous project. So that was a standalone battery storage system project across 100 of DGHP's properties. So that kind of relationship we built was a really good platform to take forward this project. So when the Scottish Government released their Social Housing Net Zero Heat Fund in 2020, we worked together to get an application in. We offered to lead in that process. Obviously, everyone here knows that such a big challenge is getting the time and resources to get these applications for funding in. It's great that the options are there now, but so we were glad to be able to provide that support. And it was key that the dialogue was open throughout that process to make sure that DGHP's aims and objectives were really, at the heart of the application. So taking it forward to submission, the decision was taken to put a proposal in under theme 3, which was integrated energy systems. So heat pumps are the kind of primary measure under this funding scheme, obviously because the decarbonisation agenda is at the heart of the Social Housing Net Zero Heat Fund. But under that theme 3, you can bring in PV and battery. So that measure mix is really key to making sure that tenants don't bear the financial cost at all, and that they can go on to enjoy energy bill savings as well. So just to talk a bit more about the actual funding process and all the various bits and bobs, it probably looks like a daunting list, but I promise it wasn't too scary. Hopefully Lorna can back that up. So kind of the basic organisational details need to be given. So DGHP was the lead applicant. Secondly, evidence of procurement approach was needed. So as Warmworks is first placed on SPA's energy efficiency consultancy framework, we were able to kind of give that route there. And I think that really kind of bolstered the application. All projects under this fund are, have a time limit on getting them completed. So it was key that, they could see that we had all the ducks in a row about what we, the next steps. So some feasibility work needed to be shown as well, and Scottish Government are really, really flexible in how that kind of is demonstrated through the application process. But for this project, we kind of gave an outline of the initial work we'd done, kind of using satellite imagery, specifically to do with the feasibility of the measures and the properties, so how much external space there was, the orientation of the properties, if there was any shadowing on the roofs and that kind of thing. And so we provided an indicative programme as well, taking us through from kind of that grant letter coming in, all the mobilisation activities through delivery and the handover, the aftercare period as well. And we had to talk a bit about project outcomes as well. So I'll kind of finish off by talking about those at the end. Financial modelling too, so just a breakdown of costs against kind of indicative funding drawdown dates as well through to the end of the fund. Licensing and consents as well, so things like G89 checks, load checks. So a key part of that was kind of talking about our relationship that we've got with the local district network operator, that's Scottish Power Energy Networks. Carbon calculations were provided as well. So we took ultimately EPC information, kind of average property size and average heat demand, and scaled that up to kind of give an indicative figure for carbon emissions that we hope to save on the project. And lastly, we talked a bit about some of the community benefits that we would hope to generate through the project as well. So just a kind of real life example of that, we've just recently arranged for our staff to give food bank donations throughout December and January to go to a local food bank in Dumfriesshire. So that's just one example of something that's going on just now. So thankfully, after that bit of work, DGHP were successful in getting all the funding that they had asked for. So through the fund, any project can get up to 50% of the total project value funded, which was what DGHP managed to secure. So the total project value is just short of 3 million. So that was 1.48 leverage through the fund. So I'll talk just a bit about our role as managing agent as well. So that's just one part of the kind of scope of services that you can procure through the SPA's energy efficiency consultancy framework. So this role is one that we deliver for the Scottish Government on their National Fuel Poverty Programme, Warmer Homes Scotland. And it's the same model that's in place here. And to kind of summarise, it's about taking the project from start to finish, and managing the quality and the customer journey and all those really important bits. So I'll just talk about those in a bit more detail. Firstly, the kind of project development work that really started sort of before the application went in for funding and throughout that process. And it was in that it was just key to make sure that we were sort of recommending the right systems and technologies to take forward for DGHP's properties. And we were able to provide some support in drafting contractual terms as well for DGHP's review. So managing the customer journey as well. It's really important to us that tenants are all treated as individuals throughout this process. There's so much talk just now about a just transition and making sure that we take everyone with us no matter what their circumstances are. And so all this is key. So up front, robust training is given to all subcontractors that are allocated to make sure that when they go into any property, they know that particular customer's vulnerabilities and in general the tenant demographic. And that's key for our staff as well. So our in-house surveyors and inspectors, they all get the same training. So communication plans as well, that's everything from the kind of language we use in our letters, making sure that it's all in plain English, easy to understand. And we've sort of planned out any social media kind of content that we might put in place as well, just to kind of promote the scheme and get the word out there about what we're doing. And so, as I said, supporting vulnerable tenants, making sure we understand from the outset their particular needs, working with DGHP to understand those and kind of accommodating for any requirements they might have. And last but not least, definitely not least, is that kind of post-install handover. So this, I mean, this measure mix is really innovative. I was just talking with Lorna the other day about how it's so easy once we get into the project and the kind of operational stuff to forget that this is all really, really innovative for tenants, for anyone at all. So, and it's really important to make sure that the system works right, that tenants understand how to use it and engage with it and, you know, are really interested in it, and getting them the right tariff advice as well. So kind of feeding into the whole quality assurance model is kind of the customer journey, but the wider piece of that is all about kind of workmanship standards and health and safety and that whole piece. So initially we allocate subcontractors and it's key that they have the right kind of technical accreditations and the experience, so MCS and any kind of product and system training. And it's really important to us as well that we really only work with subcontractors that are committed to quality and customer care in the same way that we are. So kind of after that, the next step is to carry out a kind of in-home survey. So Warmworks has in-house surveyors that we use, so that's carried out independently of the installers. They kind of take that forward and carry out a technical survey as well in the home to kind of inform the whole design process. And throughout that whole period, there's kind of auditing of documentation by our quality and compliance team as well. And lastly, kind of within the quality piece, we've got a team of, I think now 20 in-house inspectors. So every property on this project gets a post-completion audit just to make sure everything's up to standard. And they also carry out unannounced work in progress visits in the home as well, just making sure that health and safety kind of methodologies are being adhered to, and auditing the delivery of customer care in the home as well. So that kind of leads on quite well to the whole subcontractor management and monitoring piece. So we've got kind of downstream KPIs with all our subcontractors that we work with on this project. So we kind of work with 24 installers across Scotland, but there's 3 allocated to this project in particular. All installers get access to kind of a bespoke web portal, and they can kind of log in at any time to see their progress and their performance against the kind of average on the programme. And they're provided with monthly snapshot reporting as well. And it's all provided on kind of in graph format, tables, red, amber, green, just to make it as clear as possible to them how they're performing. And all this is kind of central to our discussions at our regular progress meetings. And so just the last thing to come on to throughout this journey is project governance. So kind of on a monthly basis, we chair project board meetings, and a key part of that is involvement from the local DNO, Sven. They've played a role in kind of doing upfront load checks, making sure there's no infrastructure barriers in place so the project can run smoothly. And DGHP have representation there as well at the board, of course, and our project team. And another part of that is just constantly looking at our risk register and making sure that our mitigations are all in place. So just the last slide I will go through before I hand over to Lorna is just to talk a bit about the outcomes that we hope to see at the end of the project. So SAP improvements aren't everything, of course. The most important thing is the tenant outcomes, but we do hope to see significant SAP improvements targeting H2 EPC-B. Future-proofing homes in line with wider decarbonisation agenda as well. DGHP is very forward-thinking, and this project is hopefully a key one for them as part of their wider agenda. Energy bill reductions as well, as I said, that measure mix, bringing in PV and battery, making sure that no tenants are seeing any fuel bill increases and going the other way and seeing savings, feeling more comfortable in their homes and feeling warmer as well. And with that, we hope to see reduced fuel poverty levels and really make a local impact into Fries and Galloway. And just lastly, as this is kind of a demonstrator project, we would say with this measure mix, we really hope to gather a lot of lessons to kind of inform future programmes like this. So things like tariff and meter arrangements, as well as wider health benefits. Just as something we saw on our battery storage project with DGHP, one thing we saw that we hadn't initially anticipated was that householders that had kind of medical apparatus with the battery unit, like if there was a power cut in the night, they just slept right through with the kind of, and they didn't see any interruption in their kind of apparatus, and that kind of was just a side benefit that just kind of shows the additional benefits that we can get from these kind of technologies as well. And lastly, tenant feedback. So it's so important that this technology mix enables a just transition for us. And it's really important as well that we take on what tenants have to say about the whole installation process and allow that to inform future programmes. Just the other day, we heard about some of the tenants on the programme already at this early stage talking about the kind of solar that they've seen generated through the systems and how warm they're feeling. So it's amazing to get that feedback, but it's really important as well that we take on all kinds of feedback and use it going forward. So hopefully that is a kind of a useful summary to lead on to Lorna's piece. So I will hand over to you, Lorna. Thank you very much.
Excellent. Thanks very much, Jenny. Thank you. And you're in control, so I'll just be saying next. Hi, everyone. I'm Lorna McCubbin. I'm Head of Asset Investment and Compliance at DGHP. Just to give you a bit of context as to where we are with DGHP, we are from the east to the west of the region. We've got 10,300 assets. And if you travel from Dumfries to Langham, which is our furthest east point, it's about 1.5 hour drive. And from Dumfries to Stranraer, it's another 1.5 hour drive through many various country roads. And we've got little pockets of properties, really coastal, very, very nice areas, into your suburban areas in Dumfries, which is the most densely populated area. This project is looking obviously at the heating types and decarbonisation. We've got about 8,000 properties that are served by gas. The remainder of properties are on other air source heat pumps, biomass. We've got storage heaters. We've got a right mishmash of heating types. This project has been specifically to look at our properties that are still on solid fuel. So this is where we were going with it. If you can go to the next slide for us, please, Jenny. Thank you. So Jenny was alluding to, we built up a really good and positive relationship with Warmworks in about 2019, when they approached us to partner up to deliver the Green Economy Fund through Spain, the delivery of 100 battery units in our properties. This was new to DGHP and new to our region as well. We were a wee bit like, oh, what are we doing here? Batteries on houses, what's happening? But it was through the education and understanding exactly what benefits these batteries could bring to our customers. We were definitely all for it, to find out that, especially about the medical apparatus, that was a side benefit that we weren't ready for, and really supported our customers in storing electricity at cheap tariffs and really big reductions in bills. Like we've been seeing 60–70% reduction in bills, and some customers actually being paid for the electricity. So a huge benefits for our customers. And then we thought, right, what else can we do here? So working with Warmworks, let's look at the next big thing, look how we can have a bigger impact in our region, looking at our properties, where could we have the biggest outcomes for our customers? Next slide. So the scope, so we worked really closely with Warmworks, and they did a lot of the groundworks here. I very much handed over a whole bunch of data. I said, there we go, there's more properties. How can you help us get a real robust scope together to really have that impact that we need? So we've got 101 properties in Dumfries and Galloway that are still on solid fuel. These customers have been repeat refusals for any investment work. So really, really hard to get into these properties to say, how can we improve outcomes here? So even when we're going through the gas cycles, they didn't want to change to gas because they preferred their solid fuel. Some of them you can't put gas in and will be changing to electric. And some of the customers didn't want electric in their properties. So we have had quite a journey in working with our customer base here, and I'll come on to that later on. But that was the scope that we were putting forward for the application. Next slide. And I think you'll be welcoming the recording of this because I talk so quick. So if I do go too quick, I'll answer any questions at the end. So definitely our project outcomes were customer focused. What can we do here that's going to benefit and enhance the lives of our customers living in our properties? So we wanted to see utility savings. We wanted to see a reduction in CO2 emissions, and also for ourselves towards our H2 targets. So looking at the 60% savings, that was already, we could demonstrate that through the battery only project. And what else could we do here by looking at the solar PVs and the air source to mitigate against any expenditure that the customers might face from changing from solid fuel. Next slide, please. So the approval, because it was quite a large sum, was 2.9 million. Obviously, we had several governance layers you have to go through to make sure that everything's balanced. So I had to go through approval for our finance colleagues through Treasury to make sure that we had to finance the capital there for it. And then also had to see our CEO and our exec team, making sure that they were comfortable with our approach. When we asked about the procurement, it was straight away frameworks, just because they just offer what we need. We needed a very quick decision in how we're going to appoint. The deadlines that we were getting from Scottish Government aren't generous, it's very, very tight. As soon as you start to apply, you've only got like 2 or 3 weeks to put your package together and get it for them to approve it. So there was no question really that we were going to be looking for a framework, and working with Warmworks, we knew that they were the highest ranking. And this also obviously demonstrates the value for money. It allows you to do that quick appointment. We didn't have to go through open procurement. We didn't have to put it through tender, wait for a month to get all your feedback in, to do your evaluations, to do your award, and then your drying off period as well. We had none of that, which was really, really advantageous for us to enable us to demonstrate to Scottish Government we had a clean route that aligned with our governance procedures, as well as procurement. So like I said, it's valued at 2.9. We were successful in gaining 1.48 million from the Scottish Government, which was very welcomed. And that was submitted in December 2020. Next slide. So we received the approval in March 21. So this is all ongoing through COVID. Like Jenny and I have been working together for almost a year and I've never met her. So this has all been done through Zoom and team meetings, working really well collaboratively together. But again, it's through very tricky times, trying to get a new initiative off the ground, not being able to see each other, lots of emails backwards and forwards, lots of team meetings at strange times to say, have you done this, have you done that, all the checks and balances. And the last project actually ended at the beginning of COVID, which was quite challenging as well. So once we got the approval through from Scottish Government, the direct award was made to Warmworks. Through the application process, you have to show intent on how you're going to procure. So we had to do a letter of intent to Warmworks to demonstrate that they would have been our preferred contractor should we be given approval. And then that just followed through the processes. So we just went through the process. Thank you. So the delivery, Jenny also mentioned about the project board. So DGHP, Warmworks and Spain, we work obviously very closely together to get this delivered. In DGHP, the investment team, I've got project officers, so we've got for operational delivery, and we've got Paul from Warmworks, Jenny's side. They're the two operational team members that see this day-to-day running, and we have monthly meetings with them to see how it's going. Spain have been crucial, and working with them to make sure that we're looking at capacity and looking at infrastructure. Looking at the addresses in Dumfries and Galloway are very sparse. So within this 101 property address list, we've got properties in Sanka, which was a traditional mining town, which the majority of the solid fuel properties are, but we've also got properties in Stranraer. So Spain have had to look at the infrastructure around all of these areas to make sure it could take the load of us generating that much electricity. The enhanced customer engagement plan, this was crucial to get the setting up. It was part of the risk register about the customer buy-in. So we did a bit of phone calling and everything just beforehand, before we did the application, about tenant take-up, customer take-up. But then we also have delivered, well, Warmworks have delivered several sessions to our housing officers and training as to what the benefits are of the system. Enhanced engagement has been a door chapping, sitting down with our customers, COVID secure. Everyone's wearing face masks all the time. And even when the customers are where they wanted to go. So for a cup of tea somewhere, we'd go with them and have an engagement with them to discuss exactly what this product is. And this has been crucial to make sure that we get the customer buy-in, because we can't just do something to a person, we can't do something to the property. They have to be part of the journey with it. And that is good. That is so important for us to make sure that our customers are happy with what they're receiving in their homes. So we've had 12 systems that have been installed and have been welcomed by customers. And the next slide shows you these this measure mix. Sorry. So this is one of our properties in Kirkcudbright, the air source heat pump, the Vaniat, the Tesla battery, and the solar is going up. And again, the customer feedback has been really, really positive. One customer had the technical gentleman at the end doing the sign off, and they were just astounded that they had made £10 with electricity from their solar panels, so that they could actually see what was generated from the solar. Another customer in Dalbeattie was just saying just how ambient the temperature in her home is now just a nice ambient temperature. She's not cold in one room and hot in another because of the solid fuel. So again, I don't think they realized just the impact that this measure mix would have for themselves. So we're not, so the customers are the focus, but also looking at the property and longevity and decarbonisation. This 101 homes is going to demonstrate to us how we can move this forward and really have this as the focus of all the outcomes that we're going to get from here, to say how we're going to convert to gas, properties from gas onto air source, battery and solar. It's not cheap. It's quite expensive. When you break it down, it's 28k a property. It's very expensive. But this is like, we as DGHP, we wouldn't have been able to do this without funding and without Warmworks support and delivery for this. So it's about how Scottish Government now are going to basically put their money where their mouth is. They say that they want to be able to give us the tools to do decarbonisation. But again, like you say, £28,000 per property. And then you look at the value of your property and sometimes it doesn't add up. So it's about making sure we're making the right decisions for the right property type, the right archetype, and also for our customers. Thank you, Jenny. And that was me. So again, I'm sorry, I do talk very quick. It's just natural. So if you do have any questions, I'll be happy. Email or anything afterwards. I can share the project with yourselves as to what we're doing.
That was great. Thank you very much, Lorna, Jenny and Graham, for your presentations. I guess we'll just open it up to questions then. So say you can use the chat function, or if you're happy to come on camera, then please just raise your hand and you can pose your question directly.